we are going to go through the January 2026 English A Paper 2. This would have been the hybrid exam, so they would have had the exam paper online and you would have had to write the answers. Alright, so the instructions in this paper is that you must read carefully the following article on farming in the 21st century. First, you must list the 5 main points discussed and then write the summary of the article in no more than 120 words in one paragraph. As far as possible, use your own words. Your summary must be in continuous prose. You must include in your summary paragraph the 5 points you listed and other relevant points. A minimum of 7 points is required in order for you to score full marks. Alright, so they will be assessing how well you can identify the main ideas and opinions in the extract. Organize and express these ideas and opinions in your own words. Use appropriate grammar, sentence structure, vocabulary, spelling, and punctuation. This article is called Farming in the 21st Century and it has been adapted from Arlene Dum, Farming in the 21st Century, a Modern Business in a Modern World. Alright, so let's read through the article first. Farmers of the 21st century are first and foremost entrepreneurs. The success of their farms rests squarely on their shoulders, or on those of the workers they hire. Today, most farms and ranches in the United States are small, but farms are getting larger and more concentrated. Increasingly, farmers contract with large business operations called agribusinesses. These businesses purchase the farmers' crops or animals and produce the food that we recognize on grocery store shelves. Farmers who do business in this way say that they reduce the risk of losing money because they are guaranteed a buyer that will offer them a known price for their crops or animals. Other farmers sell their products themselves elsewhere, such as on commodities exchanges, trading centers similar to stock markets, where prices often are determined by worldwide supply and demand for the products. A variety of factors such as worldwide market conditions may lower or raise the prices that these farmers receive. Because these farmers have little control over pricing, keeping down the cost of production is especially important. Modern farmers use a wide range of techniques to maximize production and reduce costs. Even something as common as the cell phone, for example, has improved farm workers' ability to coordinate their efforts over thousands of acres, speeding up their work. Farmers are finding ways to apply modern techniques and increase efficiency. In many ways, the business of raising crops today is distinctly modern. For example, many farmers use integrated pest management techniques to control pests without pesticides. To eradicate a pest, they might introduce another type of insect that feeds on it or use a substance that interferes with the pest reproductive cycle. Among the more contemporary methods of raising crops are precision farming, bioengineering, and organic farming. Precision farming involves using technology and data to make efficient decisions about raising crops. Two methods of precision farming include the making of detailed maps of the land and the use of electronic yield monitoring. Farmers use detailed maps of the land that are created from satellite and aerial photographs. Added to these maps are data from sensing devices in the ground that measure the amounts of water, weeds, and nutrients in the soil. Today's global positioning systems allow exact locations of the land and nutrients to be pinpointed. Farmers use this information to decide where to add fertilizer, herbicides, and water. In this way, farmers reduce their costs by cutting down on unnecessary applications. Alright, so let us look at the 5 main points we have in this article. So the 5 main points that we chose would be: modern farmers are business owners whose businesses are farms. Farmers collaborate with agribusinesses via a contract, as a guaranteed buyer will offer the farmer a consistent price for their produce. Some farmers find sales for their products in other locations. It is important to ensure that production costs are low. In order to increase production and decrease costs, farmers must use various techniques. Supply and demand determine the prices of these products. Technology uses sensors in the ground to collect data so farmers can make the best decisions on how to grow crops. Okay, so these last 2 points, 6 and 7, are the 2 extra points that we will be putting into the summary. If you remember, when we look back at the instructions, they said that we must list 5 main points. Those are these first 5 main points here. Then when we have to write our summary of 120 words, a minimum of 7 points is required in order to score full marks. So that is where these 2 extra points come in. Now when we put everything together, it does not have to go in this particular order. Okay, it needs to go in whichever order is most logical for the way you are writing it. So the summary that we have is modern farmers are business owners whose businesses are farms. As a result, they must manage their farms carefully to make a profit and reduce financial risks. One way they do this is by collaborating with agribusinesses through contracts, since guaranteed buyers can offer farmers a consistent price for their produce. However, some farmers sell their products in other locations where prices are determined by supply and demand. Therefore, farmers must ensure that their production costs remain low. In order to increase production and decrease costs, they must use various modern techniques. Additionally, technology uses sensors in the ground to collect data, so farmers can make better decisions about how to grow crops efficiently and successfully. And we have various connectives like as a result, one way, however, therefore, in order to, and additionally, to help our summary or paragraph flow a lot better. It is to ensure it does not sound choppy or disconnected. Now let's take a look at our letter prompt. Alright, so the instructions on this is how we must study the situation. So Ronnie Boodram, a local footballer, requires urgent medical attention in the neighboring island of Martinique. His family does not have the financial resources to pay for the medical expenses. His family has written to your community group seeking assistance. You are the secretary of the Jericho Community Group. Write a letter to the Commissioner of Police requesting permission to hold a fundraising dance on the 19th of June 2026 between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. on behalf of the president of the group, Jeremy White. The venue will be the local community center. Proceeds from the fundraising event will be used to pay for Ronnie's medical expenses and the trip to Martinique. Your letter must be in continuous prose, so we know for sure it's a letter because they say it's a letter. Things that will be assessed you'll be assessed on how well you can format the letter. That means putting in all the relevant parts, how well you can select complete and relevant information, organize and express the information, use appropriate grammar, sentence structure, vocabulary, spelling, and punctuation. Now let us take a look at the letter itself. So, since it is a formal letter, we know it's a formal letter because you are writing to the Commissioner of Police. You don't write an informal letter to the Commissioner of Police. So it has to be formal. So the way we start this off is we have to have our sender's address, that is on the right hand side on the top upper corner there. Jericho Community Group, Jericho Village, Sangre Grande, 23rd of April 2026. Notice how we write the address. We have commas and we have a full stop. Then on the left hand side over here, we have the recipient's address. So this is the Commissioner of Police, Police Administration Building, number 4 John Street, Port of Spain. Then below that in the middle of the paper, we have our title or subject of the letter, which is request for permission to hold a fundraising dance. Now we're going to start with the opening salutations of Dear Sir. Remember, as it is formal, you can have either a comma or a colon. For this one, we are using a colon. So it goes, on behalf of the president of the Jericho Community Group, Mr. Jerry White, I respectfully request permission to hold a fundraising dance on the 19th of June 2026 from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Jericho Community Center. So we're telling them right away from the very first sentence why we are writing the letter. We also let them know that we are writing on behalf of Jeremy White. Now, the purpose of this event is to raise funds for Mr. Ronnie Boodram, a local footballer who urgently requires medical attention in the neighboring island of Martinique. Unfortunately, his family is unable to meet the medical and traveling expenses involved. So I given them the reason for the fundraising event. Now we continue into the second paragraph. As a community group, we believe it is our duty to assist in this time of need. All proceeds from the event will go towards paying Mr. Boodram's medical expenses and transportation costs for the trip to Martinique. We expect the function to be orderly and properly supervised. Suitable measures will be put in place to ensure the safety of patrons and to maintain law and order throughout the event. So we are writing to the Commissioner of Police. We would like to let them know that it will be an orderly event and it will not be anything that will cause disruptions in the society. Now, we would be very grateful if you would grant us the necessary permission to host this activity. Your kind consideration of this request would be greatly appreciated, since the funds raised can make a significant difference in helping Mr. Budram receive urgent treatment he needs. So that is a bit of us expressing gratitude. Now we are ending off with thank you for your attention to this matter. So we are expressing gratitude here, and we look forward to your favorable response. So we are now expressing hopes of future interactions, hope of them responding to say yes. So now it says, yours truly, for the closing salutations, only Y is capital, Hannah Montana, Secretary, Jericho Community Group. So we must also list the person's role in the club, or the group, sorry, and the name of the group again. Alright, so that is it for our letter there. Now we are moving on to look at our story, our narrative section. So in our narrative section, the instructions are your answer should be approximately 400 to 450 words in length. You must write it in standard English, however dialect may be used in conversation. Your answer will be assessed on how well you are able to use the stimulus provided. The stimulus is either pictured, worded, prompted. How well you can develop and organize the content of your writing. Use language appropriate to your audience, purpose, and content. And use appropriate grammar, sentence structure, paragraphs, vocabulary, spelling, punctuation. So we have two prompts. We have this story one, this one with a picture here. You have to look, when you have a picture prompt and you want to write on that one, you need to study the picture clearly, because you can't write on the you can't pretend that a certain part of the image doesn't exist. So for example, in this picture it is sometime close to the evening period, as we can see the sun setting. We see the ocean is looking a bit rough, it's crashing against these rocks. This boy is holding on to the rocks and he is looking like he is in distress. There's a boat or a raft behind him. People are trying to get off. So you can't write and pretend the other people behind him doesn't exist, or that he's in a different location than the desert or the town. You need to write on what is in the picture, so you need to examine the picture clearly before writing on it. Now we have another prompt, which is write your story based on the sentence below. Jenna was a fun-loving and ambitious lady who motivated many of us. So you have a worded prompt, and as it says to write your story based on the sentence, you do not need to include that sentence in your story. It just needs to, the story needs to be built around that line. For the purpose of this paper, we are writing on the image, as we have never done that before. So let's take a read in the story first of all. So first we are saying, the sea was wild that evening, churning and crashing against dark rocks like an angry beast. I had gone with my uncle to the shoreline to help a group of volunteers distribute blankets and food. None of us expected to witness what happened next. At first, all I saw was a small, overloaded boat in the distance. It looked fragile against the restless water. As it came closer, I noticed frightened faces packed tightly together, men, women, and children, all clinging to one another. The engine coughed, spluttered, and then died. A cry rose from the boat, then at first, then desperate. Everybody move, shouted Uncle Ravi. The volunteers rushed into action. Some waded into the shallow turf while others stretched out their hands from the rocks. Waves slammed against the side of the boat, causing it to tilt dangerously. I stood frozen for a second, my heart pounding in my ears. Then I saw a little boy, no older than 8, stumbled out of the boat. He wore an orange life jacket and looked terrified. A wave knocked him sideways and he scraped his hands against the rocks. Without thinking, I ran forward. "Hold on," I cried. He looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. I reached out and gripped his wrist, just as another wave crashed over us. The water soaked my clothes and nearly knocked me off balance. as I pulled with all my strength until he was safely on the rocks beside me. The boy clung to me, shivering violently. "My mother," he whispered. We turned and saw a woman struggling to step out of the boat with a baby in her arms. 2 volunteers quickly helped her ashore. One by one, the passengers were guided to safety. Some collapsed on the beach, exhausted. Others kissed the ground and wept openly. The little boy finally spotted his mother and ran to her, burying his face in her wet skirts. I thought the rescue was over, but Uncle Ravi placed a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "This is only the beginning. These people have escaped danger, but now they must rebuild their lives." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sea seemed to calm. Blankets were wrapped around trembling shoulders, and hot soup was passed around. The little boy looked back at me and managed a weak smile. In that moment, standing on the cold rocks with salt on my skin and fear still in my chest, I understood something I would never forget. Sometimes hope does not arrive as a grand miracle. Sometimes it comes as an outstretched hand on a stormy shore. Now let us analyze the story. So it starts off with the opening. The sea was wild that evening, churning and crashing against the dark rocks like an angry beast. This is supposed to be the hook, the very first line of the story. It is meant to grab the attention of the reader and pull them in, make them excited and enticed to continue reading the story. For this particular story, the opening works, as it starts off with a very strong description of the ocean. It creates a sense of danger via all of the adjectives that it uses, so words like wild and churning, crashing. We have dark rocks, and it is also being compared to an angry beast. It makes the sea feel violent, and it gives off a frightened mood. It makes the reader feel like something serious is about to happen. So the reader now wonders what is going to happen in such dangerous conditions, why is the narrator there, as well as who will be affected by this wild sea. In the story, we have several characters. We have the narrator, who happens to be the main character, or will always be referred to as I. Uncle Ravi, who is the leader or the helper. We have the little boy, who is vulnerable, and he adds the purpose of being a vulnerable child who needs help. We have the boy's mother, another person in danger. We have a group of volunteers who are the helpers, and the group of passengers on the boat who are the people being rescued. Each character has a purpose. The narrator is the person whose eyes we experience the rescue through. Uncle Ravi is the person who gives directions and shows leadership. The little boy creates the most emotional moment of the story when he says, "My mother." The mother deepens the reader's concern because she is protecting her baby, so we feel a little extra sorry for her. The volunteers are there to help make the rescue more realistic and believable, as nobody would really believe a 9-year-old boy or a child was able to rescue all of these people by himself. And the passengers are there to show the larger human suffering behind the event that is taking place in the story. So the main character is the narrator in the story. We notice it is being written in first person perspective. The narrator is presented as someone who is caring, observant, frightened, brave, compassionate, and mature by the end of the story. They show us these things. They do not say that I was brave at any point in time in the story. They show us the bravery. They show us the bravery through his actions as the narrator notices there's danger. He also freezes for a second like a normal human being, and then he runs forward before reaching out for the child. He pulls him to safety despite the waves crashing and being dangerous. So when you write your story, you must show the emotion, the qualities of the characters without stating it. So the setting of the story includes the shoreline, the dark rocks, the rough sea, the evening or the sunset, and the cold or stormy conditions. So the reason the setting is used is to create the specific mood of fear, danger, urgency, uncertainty, or tension. Everyone is scared in the story. It is a dangerous moment where people could die. It is urgent as their people's lives are at risk. There is also uncertainty as people are uncertain if they will continue to live or if their lives will be destroyed. and there is tension all around. So later on, when the sun dips and the sea calms, the setting now becomes one of relief, quiet, safety, as well as hope. So do not just say that they were by the sea. You must add different details to show that. So the sound, the color, the weather, the movement, the atmosphere. For example, in the story they use words like wild, churning, crashing, dark rocks, and stormy shore to show us that they are the beach. These details make the scene feel more real. Now we have the conflict to the problem. The main conflict is just that there's a boat of frightened people who's in danger, and those people on the shore must rescue them before someone is badly hurt or lost in the sea. This is a real problem in the story. It is not a fake problem, Every good story is a problem. Without a problem, there is no suspense. In this one, the conflict is strong as it is serious, it is life-threatening to everyone, there's children involved, the sea itself is dangerous, and the situation is emotional as well as physical. Emotional because these people have left behind their lives and will now be making a new one in this country. The reader cares about this because this is not just a small problem. Lives are at risk. We also add elements of the backstory to help explain what happened before the main action. So, for example, we have that the narrator and uncle had gone to help volunteers distribute blankets and food. People on the boat were fleeing danger, and they had already escaped something terrible before reaching the shore. So, the backstory has added why the volunteers were already there, why the arriving passengers were so desperate, why the rescue matters beyond the immediate physical danger, why Uncle Ravi says this is only the beginning. So without this, the story is just about a sea rescue. But with this backstory, we are now able to understand the suffering of the people as they may have had to live through some civil unrest in their own country or war or some kind of danger. It's also about the people trying to survive, being displaced. So displacement is just when you are put out of your homes and you need to move out and find somewhere else to live and hope for a better life. Let's talk about the plot structure of the story. So it is the exposition is the beginning, and it introduces the characters, the setting, and the situation. So in this story, the narrator is at the shoreline with Uncle Ravi. The volunteers are all distributing blankets and food. The sea is rough and dangerous, and the evening already feels tense. The rise in action now is when the tension starts to build. So in this story, they notice a small overloaded boat. Then there's frightened faces that they see. The engine coughs and dies. There's a desperate cry from the boat. The volunteers start rushing into action. Then the boat starts tipping dangerously, and little boy stumbles and is hurt. All of these details increases the fear and suspense for the readers. Now the climax. So this is the most tense and important moment in the story. In this story, the climax is when they say the narrator grabbed little boy's wrist and pulling him to safety as the waves crashed over them. So this is the climax because the danger is immediate there. They could both die and get washed out into the ocean. The boy may be lost or injured, right? The narrator is also at risk. Everything happens in one intense moment. Then we have the fall in action. So this is what happens right after the climax. In the story, the boy is safe on the rocks. He then whispers about his mother, and the volunteers help the woman carrying the baby. The rest of the passengers are guided to shore. The resolution is now the outcome or the ending of the story. Here, everyone is brought to safety. Blankets and soups are given out. The little boy finds his mother. The narrator reflects on the meaning of hope. The sea calms, matching the calmer ending. And the story ends not only with physical rescue, but with a lesson about humanity and hope. In the story, we have a few points of dialogue. We have everybody move, hold on, my mother, he whispered, this is only beginning. Dialogue is used to make the story feel more alive, and every piece of dialogue has a purpose. When Uncle Ravi says everybody move, it is to show urgency and leadership. When the narrator says hold on, it is to show quick action and concern for the boy. When the boy says my mother, it is to show his fear and emotional need. And when the uncle says this is only the beginning, it gives the story a deeper meaning, showing us that they experienced some kind of unrest in their own country and that they will now have a lot of hardship to endure continuing on with the rest of their lives, trying to rebuild their life in a new country. In the story, suspense is added in several ways. It makes the reader ask questions. So we wonder now, will the boat capsize? Will the people get off safely? Will the little boy drown or be badly hurt? Will his mother and baby survive? And can the volunteers save everyone in time? Some techniques used is the violent opening, the fact that the boat is overloaded, too many people on it, the engine is dying, there's desperate cries from the back of the boat. The waves are dangerous. The narrator freezes for a second, creating hesitation. The little child stumbling upon the rocks, and the crashing wave during the rescue. The mood changes throughout the story. The story begins with the mood of something threatening, tense, dangerous, and fearful. Then it moves to one that is frantic, emotional, desperate, and painful in the middle. And at the end, it becomes one of relief, calm, it's reflective and hopeful. So all of this comes when the rescue succeeds, the blankets and soup has been shared, the boy smiles weakly, and the narrator's final reflection. Now let's talk about the imagery and description. The story has a lot of imagery. So examples would be: the sea was wild, crashing against the dark rocks, like an angry beast, heart pounding in my ears, salt on my skin and fear still in my chest. This is effective as the images help the reader to see the scene, hear the sea, feel the fear, and imagine the physical struggle. So the sea is also described almost like a living enemy. This is effective because it makes nature seem powerful and dangerous. We also have figurative language, so we have simile when he says like an angry beast. It is to compare the sea to an angry beast to show the violence, the danger, and the unpredictability, as well as the power of the ocean and nature. And the ending is: sometimes hope does not arrive as a grand miracle. Sometimes it comes as an outstretched hand on a stormy shore. This ending works as the narrative ending should feel earned. This ending works because it gives closure, reflection, a lesson to the readers, and emotional power. The characters have gone through danger and fear, so this final thought feels meaningful. Because notice, it didn't say everyone was rescued. Instead, it ends off with a deeper meaning, a memorable image, and a lesson about humanity. Now let's take a look at the argumentative section. So they say that our answer should be approximately 250 to 300 words in length, and it will be assessed on the appropriateness of the content, clarity, organization, and development of the argument, correctness of grammar, sentence structure, paragraphs, vocabulary, spelling, and punctuation. The prompt is: children under 13 years of age should be allowed to have social media accounts. Write an argumentative essay giving your views on a statement. So the argumentative essay that we have is: social media is the use of online platforms to create, share, and exchange information with others. Although some argue that it helps children communicate, its dangers are greater than its benefits. Children under 13 should not have social media accounts because they may be too immature, exposed to harmful content, and distracted from schoolwork. Certainly, children under 13 are often too immature to use social media responsibly. Many do not fully understand privacy, online safety, or the long-term effects of posting online. As a result, they may share personal information, photos or videos that put them at risk of embarrassment, bullying, or contact with strangers. Therefore, their lack of maturity makes social media unsafe for children under 13. In addition, social media can expose young children to harmful content such as pornography and violent material. These images and videos can frighten, confuse, or disturb children because they are not emotionally mature enough to understand or handle them. As a result, this exposure can negatively affect their behavior, thinking, and emotional well-being. Furthermore, excessive use of social media affects children's schoolwork, sleep, and social development. Instead of reading, exercising, or interacting face-to-face with others, they may spend too much time on screens seeking online approval. As a result, they may become distracted, tired, less confident socially, and perform poorly in school. Therefore, excessive use of social media can negatively affect children's overall development. In conclusion, children under 13 should not be allowed to have social media accounts because they are not mature enough to use them safely. Social media may expose them to harmful content, distract them from schoolwork, and affect their development. Therefore, parents should protect young children while limiting their access to these platforms. Now let us look at it a bit more in depth. So the topic is, children under 13 years of age should be allowed to have social media accounts. And the side we choose is that they should not be allowed to have social media accounts. In our introduction, our hook is, social media is the use of online platforms to create, share, and exchange information with others. This is a definition of the key term social media, so it works as a hook. We also acknowledge the other side in our background information when we say, although some argue that it helps children communicate, its dangers are greater than its benefits. This sentence shows that the writer understands that there is another side to the argument, which is the side that it is beneficial. And it is useful in argumentative writing as it shows that the writer is fair and understands both sides of the argument. So you're not speaking or you're not arguing without acknowledging or understanding the next side. Our thesis statement is, children under 13 should not have social media accounts because they may be too immature, exposed to harmful content, and distracted from schoolwork. So here we have our position, which is that the children under 13 should not have social media accounts, as well as our three reasons. Reason 1 is that they may be too mature, reason 2 is that they may be exposed to harmful content, and reason 3 is that they may be distracted from schoolwork. Our first body paragraph talks about immaturity. So the topic sentence is, certainly, children under 13 are often too immature to use social media responsibly. This topic sentence clearly introduces the first reason, being that they are too mature. The word certainly here is a connective that sounds more confident. The explanation we have is, many do not fully understand privacy, online safety, or the long-term effects of posting online. Stating the point alone is not enough, so we must explain why these young children are too immature. And what we say is, as a result, they may share personal information, photos, or videos that put them at risk of embarrassment, bullying, or contact with strangers. So this sentence continues to develop the point and shows what could happen if children are using social media carelessly. It makes the argument sound more convincing because the reader could clearly see the danger. Our paragraph then ends off with, therefore, their lack of maturity makes social media unsafe for children under 13. This sentence just links back to the main paragraph or the main argument. So a strong argumentative paragraph should not just explain a point, it should connect it back to the writer's position or the topic. Our second body paragraph now is about harmful content. The topic sentence goes, in addition, social media can expose young children to harmful content such as pornography and violent material. This sentence is used to introduce the second point. It also uses the transition word or the connective in addition to show that we are adding another point. This one focuses on danger and how and the content that children see are not suitable for their age. The explanation we give is, these images and videos can frighten, confuse, or disturb children because they are not emotionally mature to understand or handle them. This explains why harmful content is dangerous. The writer does not just say that children may see bad things online, the writer explains the effect of these things on children. This makes the argument stronger because it focuses on the child's development. So the result now is, as a result, the exposure can negatively affect their behavior, thinking, and emotional well-being. This sentence shows the sequence of being exposed to harmful content. This is important because the essay is not only saying social media is inappropriate, it shows that it can damage a child's development. Now we talk about body paragraph 3, schoolwork. It talks about schoolwork, sleep, and social development. So the topic sentence is, furthermore, excessive use of social media can affect children's schoolwork, social and sleep, and social development. So now we are introducing the third reason clearly, right, with that. The word furthermore is another connective that helps the essay to flow smoothly from the previous point. The paragraph focuses on how social media can interfere with a child's daily life and growth. The essay says, instead of reading, exercising, or interacting face-to-face with others, they may spend too much time on screens seeking online approval. This sentence explains what children may lose when they spend too much time on social media. The phrase seeking online approval is also important because it shows that children may become too concerned with likes, content, comments, and attention online. We have, as a result, they may become distracted, tired, less confident socially, and perform poorly in school. This sentence shows the negative effects of too much social media use. This gives the paragraph clear development. It shows how social media can harm both education and personal growth. The paragraph ends off with the linking sentence of, therefore, excessive use of social media can negatively affect children's overall development. It reminds reader that children under 13 should not have social media because it can interfere with their development. And for our conclusion, we are restating our position, which is children under 13 should not be allowed to have social media accounts because they are not mature enough to use them safely. We also have social media may expose them to harmful content, distract them from schoolwork, and affect their development. So we are relisting our points there, and our final closing sentence is, therefore, parents should protect young children by limiting their access to these platforms. It gives off a strong ending as well as a recommendation. So notice we didn't just end off by repeating the same points, we also give a final message. The transitions or connectives that we used in the essay would have been although, certainly, as a result, therefore, in addition, furthermore, in conclusion. It is used to introduce a point, add another reason, show results, or link back to the argument as well as ending the essay. Without the transitions, the essay would sound very choppy and disconnected. And that is it for this past paper.